Very recently, Dr. Layne Norton made a video claiming that the toxins found in plant foods don't matter, and that anyone who thinks vegetables could be bad for you doesn't understand basic biology. Now normally I'd watch a video like that and think, alright, cool, and move on with my day. But this one was very different, because it was actually made in response to me. Now you might be wondering, why do we create vegetables? Why didn't we just eat the plants that are available in nature? There are 380,000 different identified species of plants.
I'm surprised he can recite a number that high. Good for you, Max.
The reason they taste so bad is because every single plant has a long list of toxic compounds that the plant uses to defend itself.
Okay, that's enough. Max, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. The only thing you should collect is that mop on top of your head and get the f*** out.
So in this video, I'm going to respond to him and explain why Layne Norton is wrong about plant toxins, vegetables, and human nutrition in general. So let's watch this.
Today on What the Fitness, broccoli is bad for you.
Broccoli is man-made or natural?
Natural.
It's natural?
Yeah?
It's not. Broccoli is man-made.
But the tattoos all over his arms, those are natural, I assume.
It's a part of a cauliflower, and it's man-made. 50 years ago, we didn't have broccoli. See, every day you learn something,
50
right?
years
This
ago?
is what a lot of people don't understand about vegetables. Every single that we eat has been selectively bred to be very different from its original form. This is done through a process called crossbreeding, where you get two similar plants, grow them next to each other, and allow them to cross-pollinate.
Oh, this guy's a carnivore. What the f*** you think they did with beef, bro? You think the cows out there are what we used to eat thousands of years ago? No, you dumb. But you're fine with that kind of breeding while you eat your fatty cut of ribeye. But the cross-pollinating of plants, this is what you're worried about. Okay.
Okay, well, first things first, it is absolutely true that every single fruit and vegetable that we eat has been selectively bred. None of the produce we see in stores today resembles its wild ancestor. Early humans and farmers deliberately bred plants for specific desirable traits, such as being larger, sweeter, less bitter, and in more recent times to be more visually appealing for the consumer. For example, wild bananas were much smaller and they were filled with hard seeds. Grapes were originally tiny and very sour. Now they have been changed to be much larger, juicy, and far more sugar dense. Some plants didn't even exist until human intervention. Like the video mentioned, broccoli is a completely man-made creation, selectively bred from wild cabbage. Now, for the record, it was actually created around 2,000 years ago, not 50 years ago, obviously. It wasn't me who said that, but I'm just setting the record straight. The list of plants that have been put through this process is nearly endless. And the reality is that this process isn't only beneficial. There are a number of downsides that relate to the plant directly, like a higher sugar content, less nutrients, and compounds that are unrecognized. Now, as Layne pointed out, rather aggressively I might add, yes, we have done this with animals also, but it's not the same thing. We've only bred animals for size and productivity. We haven't changed the entire biology of these animals by creating new animals like we have with plants. Humans have also always eaten meat, and our bodies are built to digest it perfectly. Plus, since animals defend themselves through physical means, not chemical ones, they don't contain natural defense toxins like plants do. So there's no new compounds that we as a species aren't used to. We are still eating the same thing. With plants, we have created entirely new genetic combinations. In that video, the main point I was making was about plant toxins, which are the natural chemical defenses found in fruits, vegetables, and all other plant foods. As the name plant toxins would suggest, these compounds are not found in animal foods, and therefore they aren't reduced or influenced when animals are selectively bred. Now you might be wondering, why do we create vegetables? Why didn't we just eat the plants that are available in nature? There are 380,000 different identified species of plants.
I'm surprised he can recite a number that high. Good for you, Max.
All Thank of you. these Maths was plants my
strong
taste so
suit.
bad that nobody would eat them.
Except the hunter-gatherer tribes. Okay, well, anyways.
Imagine going to a supermarket and finding a banana that was barely edible and full of large seeds. Nobody would buy these things. However, nowadays, due to this crossbreeding and selective breeding, these plant foods are a lot more preferable. Now, hunter-gatherer tribes definitely did and still do sometimes eat wild plants. However, this is not due to preference, nor does it mean that they are beneficial to them in any other way than the energy they provide. In this paper here on the Hadza tribe, the title is literally Tubers as Fallback Foods and Their Impact on Hadza Hunter-Gatherers. And when you look at the study, the only vegetable they eat is tubers, which are root vegetables similar to a turnip or parsnip. When you look at ancient fossilized bones of humans all around the world, we see the exact same thing. The main food source for all of these hunter-gatherers is animal products, whereas plants make up only a very small part of their diet. And these plants were likely fallback options when hunting wasn't successful. Even today, when people go visit these hunter-gatherer tribes that still exist, and they ask them which is your preferred food, what do you like eating the most? They typically say they love meat and only eat tubers if they have to. So yes, they may eat some tubers, but it's not exactly by choice.
The reason they taste so bad is because every single plant has a long list of toxic compounds that the plant uses to defend itself.
Okay, that's enough. For people who haven't had basic toxicology, which I promise you Nix hasn't had, the dosage makes the poison. You can take something that is very, very toxic, like cyanide, and there is an amount of it you can eat, and it will not negatively affect you. You can also take something like, I don't know, water, and if you take in too much of it, it will kill you, because the dosage makes the poison, and the dosage alone. Now, things that are more toxic because they do this at a very low dose.
Does not appear he is in a good mood when he filmed this video. My original claim that every plant has toxins in them is an undeniable truth, and my other claim that these toxins are why these plants taste so bad is also true. I mean, let's be real, most people really dislike the taste of vegetables, and if you didn't spice them up or cook them in lots of butter, the taste of these vegetables would be almost intolerable on their own. The reason vegetables have that bitter taste is because of the defense compounds that are present in them. Even the wine industry, a market worth hundreds of billions of dollars, knows this. One of the biggest challenges wine growers face comes from a plant toxin called tannins. These are compounds naturally produced by the grape in order to defend itself, but they also make the wine taste bitter and unpleasant when not controlled. So much of the winemaking process revolves around trying to manage or reduce these plant toxins to make the final product actually drinkable and more enjoyable as a whole for the consumer. Without removing these tannins, the wine would taste far too harsh. Even after these selective and crossbreeding processes, plants still contain a lot of these toxins. A lot of these plant advocates online used to claim that these toxins were essentially a hoax and that they weren't actually a real thing. But now the argument has shifted to what Layne has proclaimed in his response, that the dose of them makes the poison, and that the quantity we see in these plants is essentially harmless, and in many cases they believe it's actually beneficial. This idea is called hormesis, and how it works is that toxicity follows what's called a U-shaped curve. So very little of something has no effect, too much of something is harmful, but there's a sweet spot in the middle where it becomes beneficial. This sweet spot is supposedly where fruits and vegetables fall into. But this supposed hormetic effect with plant toxins has a massive problem. Dosage is completely unknown and undefined. Nobody knows which toxins are actually beneficial, what the correct dose is, and where it stops helping people and starts causing them harm. In the early 1900s, doctors told their patients that consuming alcohol would improve their health because of this hormetic effect. So it was suggested that a bit of alcohol supposedly toughened the body, and as a result it would strengthen your digestive system and improve heart function. But nowadays we know that is certainly not true. We now know that alcohol is not beneficial in any dosages. However, the same logic used to justify alcohol is now being used to defend plant toxins. There is absolutely zero evidence anywhere that plant toxins have a net positive. However, what we do know for 100% certainty is that every single plant contains thousands of chemicals, and none of these compounds were designed to strengthen us. They were designed to defend the plant by harming attackers.
So, these compounds in plants, if they're so toxic, Mix, please explain to me why people who eat more fruits and vegetables live longer, have less risk for cardiovascular disease, lower risk of pretty much every cancer you can possibly imagine, and actually like lower risk of other diseases like kidney disease and a bunch of other things. And this isn't like one or two studies. This is literally every study that looks at this. These toxic compounds that you're talking about aren't even close to toxic in the amounts that they're being consumed in. So broccoli today isn't what we ate, whatever, however many years ago. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because the research on this stuff is not having people eat ancient plants. They're having them eat regular fruits and vegetables that are in the store. People get healthier when they eat these things.
Now, not to come across as a smug dog, but it seems that every single vegetable advocate online, even the ones with PhDs like Layne over here, for some reason they can't interpret science. This claim that vegetable consumption translates to better health outcomes has zero real hard science that supports it. There are two types of studies which supposedly show that vegetable consumption results in better health outcomes, but both of these types of studies have serious fundamental flaws. The first type of study which supposedly shows this is called an observational study. This is where researchers get large groups of people and over time look for patterns between their behaviors and health outcomes. So essentially what they'll do in these studies is they'll follow a large group of people for say 20 years, and every few years give them a questionnaire form saying, what have you typically eaten since we last saw you? Now what typically happens in these studies is that they find that on average as people eat more vegetables, they tend to have better health outcomes. But vegetables have always been seen as healthy. So people who eat lots of vegetables are far more likely to care about their overall health. So the average person who's eating lots of vegetables is also far more likely to exercise more, smoke less, drink less alcohol, eat fewer processed foods, etc. Whereas on the other hand, the person who has been told vegetables are healthy for them, yet they decide, you know what, I don't care, I'm not going to eat lots of vegetables. This person right here is far more likely to exercise less, smoke more, drink more alcohol, eat more processed foods, so forth. This right here is called healthy and unhealthy user bias, and it's the biggest drawback with these types of studies. They can only show us correlations. They cannot show us cause and effect. All they do is show that two things happen together, but not whether one actually causes the other. This right here is why nobody claims that ice creams are the cause of shark attacks. It is clearly demonstrated that both increase during the same time of the year in summer. But that's because the warm weather leads to people buying more ice cream and more people swimming in the sea. It's not because one of these things is causing the other one. Confounding variables like this make it impossible to know whether the outcomes are truly being caused by the variable being studied or by other lifestyle differences that come along with this variable. In a tweet, Layne posted a link to 5 studies. In all 5 of these studies, they are riddled with these same confounding variables. In fact, when you actually read through these studies, even the authors of each study openly admit this in their own papers, stating that residual confounding and other lifestyle factors like exercise, smoking, alcohol, and income could easily explain or contribute to the associations that they found. So despite Layne's conviction when making his claim, none of the studies he linked to actually demonstrated that eating more fruits and vegetables directly causes people to live longer or to be healthier in any way. All they show is that people who live generally healthier lifestyles tend to eat more vegetables, which I mean is obvious. Most people don't know about plant toxins. Now the other type of study we sometimes see that supposedly shows vegetables are good for you are called randomized control trials. These are where researchers take a group of people and actually intervene by changing what they eat. In the vegetables and fruits are good for you studies, they usually increase vegetable consumption, then measure what happens typically by monitoring a couple of inflammation markers. But here's the thing, if you take someone consuming processed food and replace it with vegetables, of course they're going to see some sort of improvement. It's rather obvious that if you start eating more fruits and vegetables, which are a single ingredient food, rather than eating lots of processed foods filled with chemicals and many different plants, you're going to be generally healthier. When you remove seed oils, sugar, and refined carbohydrates, of course the body is going to respond better, but that doesn't mean these new fruits and vegetables that they're eating are the cause of the benefit. It just means that removing garbage food is going to help you out. In these studies, they try to claim that fruits and vegetables are good for you based on just some random inflammatory marker. That doesn't really mean much. We're not looking at the context of overall health. So both of these studies, they essentially prove nothing. They simply indicate that vegetables are better for you than processed food, which again, should be very obvious. One thing I do find very interesting is that when you talk to leading geneticists, the scientists that study how DNA, aging, and disease work, they all say that humans should be living to around 120 years old at least. But even despite this, even in the healthiest countries where people are eating minimal processed food and lots of so-called healthy fruits and vegetables, they're only living to 80. Now, in contrary to Layne's argument, there is a considerable amount of evidence that shows the consumption of fruits and vegetables can be problematic. For example, around 75% of all kidney stones are made of calcium oxalate, which forms when oxalate from foods binds to calcium in the kidneys. Oxalates are a plant defense compound, so by definition they're only found in plants. High oxalate foods include things like spinach, almonds, beets, and sweet potatoes. There are actually many major organizations that acknowledge this link and recommend reducing or even avoiding oxalate-rich plant foods for people at risk of kidney stones. Another study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that 99.99% of all pesticides humans consume are naturally produced by the plants themselves, and that they're not synthetic residues from farming. The researchers identified thousands of these natural defense compounds that plants create to deter insects and predators. When 52 of these natural pesticides were tested in high-dose animal studies, 27 were found to cause cancer. The authors of the study concluded that natural and synthetic chemicals are equally likely to be carcinogenic, implying that plants inherently produce a large number of biologically active compounds that can be toxic, even though they're considered natural. As well as this well-controlled clinical study published in the World Journal of Gastroenterology showed that when participants with chronic constipation completely removed fiber from their diet, including all fruits, vegetables, and grains, every single symptom they had disappeared. Their bowel frequency improved from once every 4 days to one every day, and issues like bloating, straining, abdominal pain, and anal bleeding were entirely resolved. However, those who continued on a high-fiber diet saw absolutely no improvement. This shows that even though people are told vegetables and fiber are essential in order for digestion, in reality, they can sometimes be the very cause of digestive issues, rather than the cure. We also have a lot of evidence showing that lectins, which are another type of defense compound, can cause many people problems. Lectins are actually very common. They're found in many foods like beans, lentils, peanuts, whole grains, and many vegetables. These lectins actually cross the blood-brain barrier, and they can travel all throughout the body. Once inside, they can bind to tissues and disrupt normal cell function, contributing to inflammation and autoimmune reactions in sensitive individuals. I'll quit yapping about this point and play the clip again in a second, but the fact is, every single plant produces toxins that are created to cause harm to any attacker through chemical warfare.
But since you're a carnivore idiot, you have to try and justify why fruits and vegetables are bad for you, because you don't want to think about your own mortality with your LDL cholesterol over 500, which, by the way, the hunter-gatherer tribes that these carnivores always invoke, like the Hadza, and they ate mostly meat. Do you know, Max, what their LDL cholesterol was on average? Under 50. And yet people like you will be sitting there with LDL over 300 like, nah, this is good for me. No, you are drastically raising your risk for cardiovascular disease. But you care more about your carnivore identity, which is why it's literally in your Instagram name, than you do about the actual data.
I'm not sure what LDL has to do with my video on plant toxins, but I have already made a video where I fully debunk this LDL claim, which I'll put a link to at the end of this video. Quick summary though is that the evidence on LDL is nothing like he makes it sound. Even large-scale meta-analysis have shown inconsistent or weak links between LDL and heart disease risk. In fact, in many cases, high LDL is associated with longer lifespan. Not to mention there's a study with over 100,000 people that shows that 50% of people who have heart disease have low LDL in the quote safe range. So pretending that the science is settled on LDL is very misleading. What is annoying, however, is that I changed my Instagram name like a month before he put out this video. But because he only posted this video recently, it looks like I changed my Instagram name because of his comments. So yeah, just gotta set the record straight on that. I don't want to be out here looking like I'm that soft that a single Instagram comment has made me reconsider my life choices. It was changed way back.
And I could point out tons of compounds in meat that are toxic, but not in the dosages found in meat. Oh, but wait, those are what does Paul Stolze say? Those are hormetic. Yeah, how convenient that the chemicals, the toxic compounds that you like in meat are somehow having this hormetic effect, but the compounds in vegetables, those are the ones that are toxic. We call this asymmetrical application of logic, meaning they invoke a specific line of logic when it fits their bias, and then they discard that as soon as it doesn't fit their bias, because they are so brain dead by their own echo chamber that they can't think outside of the little tiny box they put themselves into.
Here's the thing. Every single living organism's two primary objectives are survival and reproduction. In order to do this, they need a way to defend themselves. Plants are stationary, so therefore they must defend themselves through chemical warfare. But animals are motile organisms, meaning they can move. This is why they defend themselves through physical capability, like kicking, running, and biting. The reason for most of the compounds in plants is defense, so they are there to cause harm. In meat, the compounds are not there with that same objective in mind due to the physical capability that animals have. This is why meat does not contain defense compounds, and it's why Layne couldn't name a single one of these quote toxic compounds found in meat.
Broccoli contains compounds such as lectins and oxalates, which quite literally bind to our cells and cause inflammation. This is why vegetables still taste bitter.
If only we had human randomized controlled trials where they feed fruits and vegetables and look at levels of inflammation. Oh wait, they do, and it lowers inflammation. Max, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. The only thing you should collect is that mop on top of your head and get the out.
Alright, I'll give it to him. That part right there was a little bit funny. Before I address the very important claim of him calling my hair a mop, let's first look at these studies that he's linked. Now you would assume that because these are the studies that Layne has decided to link, they must be the most compelling studies to exist on why vegetables are supposedly good for you. So let's have a look and give them a thorough breakdown. There are 9 studies Layne linked to. The first 5 are association studies, which show an association between higher vegetable consumption and better health outcomes. We discussed these studies earlier. They only show associations. In all 5 of these studies, the people who consume more vegetables are more health conscious people and have lower rates of smoking, drinking, and processed food consumption. In fact, the authors in all 5 of these studies actually acknowledge this and say their findings could easily be explained by other factors such as these. Not a single one of these 5 studies prove vegetables are good for you. They simply indicate that people who eat lots of vegetables and actually care about their health tend to be healthier than people who eat lots of processed foods and don't care about their health, which I mean is no surprise. Because these are association studies, they cannot prove cause and effect. So none of these studies do anything to prove that fruits and vegetables are optimal for human health. This next study is a randomized control trial. These are the other type of study that we talked about earlier, where they take people eating a processed food heavy diet, put them on a diet that has less processed food and more fruits and vegetables, and because some inflammatory markers get better, they say, look, fruits and vegetables are clearly good for you. When in reality, all it indicates is that single ingredient foods are better for you than ultra processed foods. Now there are many issues with this study. I won't bore you by going through all of them. Instead, I'll just break down a few of the main issues. Firstly, the sample size was only 56 people, which is far too small to draw any strong or reliable conclusion. With such a small group, even minor differences between individuals, like genetics, baseline diet, activity level, or previous lifestyle factors can completely skew the results. Another issue is the study only lasted 2 weeks. Inflammation, gut adaptation, and immune responses can take much longer to shift meaningfully. A 2-week trial certainly isn't long enough to measure long-term health outcomes. But the biggest issue of them all is that there is a major question that was not answered, and that is, what was the control group fed? The paper says they ate a basal diet that excluded fruits and vegetables, but doesn't make clear what replaced them. I think it's pretty safe to infer that they weren't put on a species-appropriate carnivore diet, otherwise that would have been stated. So the control group was likely eating lots of processed foods. If the control group was eating this way, which is highly likely, any change in the vegetable group could simply be explained by the fact that they weren't eating processed foods, not because vegetables themselves are good for you. However, the craziest part about this entire study is actually the results. After 2 weeks, the researchers measured common inflammation markers. Here are the findings between the no vegetable group, aka the processed food group, and the high vegetable group. IL-6 showed a small drop, about 19 to 20% in the high vegetable group. C-reactive protein, one of the most widely used indicators of inflammation, showed no change at all. TNF-alpha and its related receptors also didn't move. And rather interestingly, IL-8, which is a pro-inflammatory immune signaling molecule that attracts white blood cells to sites of inflammation, actually increased in the high vegetable group by more than 15% in comparison to the basal/processed food group. So the findings of this study are that only one key inflammatory marker out of 4 is better in the vegetable group. 1 is somehow better in the processed food group, and the majority of them didn't have any significant change. So this study didn't even show vegetables are better for you than processed foods. The conclusion of this study even states, in this young healthy population, consumption of cruciferous and apiaceous vegetables reduced circulating IL-6. However, results for other biomarkers of inflammation were not consistent. So the best study to exist showing that vegetables are supposedly good for you is a 2-week-long study with a small sample size that controlled essentially no variables, which compared people eating lots of vegetables to people eating processed foods. And the findings were essentially that vegetables are just as bad for you as processed foods. The next study is another randomized control trial, and if you thought the other studies listed were bad, just wait for this one. In this study, they compared 2 groups of people across 12 weeks. One group ate 400 grams of normal broccoli per day, and the other ate 400 grams of a different type of broccoli every day. The broccoli this group ate is a genetic variation that is high in a compound called glucoraphanin. This is a very niche rare broccoli that basically no one eats. And what they found was that the people eating this rare genetic variant of broccoli had lower LDL levels. So all the study shows is that some random genetic variant of broccoli that basically no one eats reduces your LDL level, whereas normal broccoli doesn't seem to. I'm not sure how in any way, shape or form that proves that vegetables are good for you. The 8th study he cited is a study that talks about how broccoli is man-made. So thanks for that, Layne. At this point, I think he is trying to help make my argument for me. Then the final study he listed is a narrative review, which means it's just an opinion piece summarizing other research. It doesn't test anything, it doesn't measure anything, but anyway, let's give it a check out. Now this paper here, funnily enough, actually directly acknowledges that compounds like lectins, oxalates, phytates, etc. do exist in plants to protect them from being eaten, and that these compounds can bind minerals, irritate the guts, interfere with nutrient absorption, and trigger immune responses. It also notes that cooking and processing typically only reduces these compounds by about 50%, which I mean is an improvement, but it still means that there are 50% of these toxic compounds still present when consumed. The only good thing in this paper about vegetables is that it speculates that in small doses, these same toxins might have beneficial antioxidant or hormetic effects. Again, just a hypothesis, no real evidence. The number one conclusion of this paper is actually, of the compounds reviewed, there are indications that when given in the diet in what would be considered moderate to high quantities, or when administered in isolation, they may exert effects that would be detrimental or impair the body's reserves or function in some way. There may be some individuals who are more susceptible to these effects for various reasons. So using this review as evidence that vegetables reduce inflammation is just completely misleading. If anything, all this paper shows is that plant defense compounds are definitely real and more than likely harmful. So of the 9 studies that Layne has cited, not a single one shows that fruits and vegetables are good for humans in any way. Now anyways, to address perhaps the most important claim of this video, the mop hair claim. Firstly, as a quick Google search would show, mops are long all over, they're long in all directions, whereas this right here, it's a mullet. Very different, keeping it old school. If my hair was long all over, I'd be like, you know what, he's right, he's got me on this one, but due to the fact that it is a mullet, I just can't agree with the claim. So anyway, wrong on all fronts is what I'm saying, Layne. As a whole, whilst Layne's gym advice did help me get bigger biceps when I was younger, his claims regarding plant toxins and vegetables are simply wrong, at least in my opinion. Another claim Layne made in this video is that high LDL is a big problem. However, like I mentioned earlier, this is simply not true. In this video here, I break down that claim of his and also like 5 other made up claims he makes about the carnivore diet, including how a carnivore diet is supposedly killing people. If you enjoy watching this video, chances are you'll like that one too. Anyway, as always, great speaking with you, and I'll see you next time.